Welcome back for another deep dive. All right, Paul Hill over in the UK. Sounds like you've got quite the question about Jennifer McCabe and those Google searches in the Karen Reed case.
Yeah.
You're really interested in when exactly that, how long to die in cold search happened, and how it all lines up, or doesn't, with what we see on the police cruiser dashcam footage.
Right.
And then you're also wondering, like, if the prosecution's argument about both searches happening in the same tab just doesn't hold water.
Yeah.
Does that mean the whole timestamp thing is not just like a side issue, but actual impeachment evidence?
Hmm.
Well, buckle up, Paul, because we're about to go deep on this one.
All right.
Now, for anyone just joining us, Karen Reed is accused of killing her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe.
Right.
He was found dead in a snowbank, and Karen says she dropped him off at a friend's house. But the prosecution's theory is that she hit him with her car.
And that's where this whole Google search thing comes in.
Exactly. The prosecution's pointing to this incriminating search found on the phone of Jennifer McCabe, who was with Karen that morning.
Right.
So to help us break down all the digital twists and turns, we've got a real expert in digital forensics with us today.
Happy to be here.
So let's talk searches.
Okay.
Richard Green, the digital forensics expert working with the defense.
Yeah.
He's been digging into the data from McCabe's phone and, well, let's just say he's found some interesting discrepancies.
Yeah.
So first things first, McCabe testified she made that "how long to die in cold" search around 6 a.m. while sitting in a police cruiser with Karen.
Right.
But, and this is where it gets tricky, the dash cam footage shows she never actually got into that cruiser.
Yeah, that's a pretty big contradiction right there.
So her testimony and the video evidence don't match up. Problem number one.
Okay.
But then, to make things even more complicated, Green's analysis of the phone data shows this search actually happened way earlier, at 2:27 a.m.
2:27 in the morning. That's a big difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
And get this, the initial report they gave to the defense didn't even include that 2:27 a.m. search. It only popped up when Green specifically asked for the raw image file of the phone.
Interesting.
And then, to add another layer of to this whole thing,
Yeah.
they initially handed over that raw image file without the hash value documentation.
Without the hash value.
Yeah, which is basically like a digital fingerprint that proves the data hasn't been messed with.
Right. Right.
And they only coughed it up after Green insisted.
So now we've got missing information, late disclosures, and these conflicting timestamps.
It's like a digital whodunit.
It is.
But hold on. How can we be sure that 2:27 a.m. timestamp is the real deal? Couldn't there have been some kind of mistake in the analysis?
That's a valid question.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. They've actually used both Celebrate and Magnet Forensics, two of the leading forensic software tools out there.
Okay.
And both of them back up that 2:27.40 a.m. timestamp.
Both of them.
Yep. And it all boils down to how the data is stored and retrieved.
All right, I'm ready for the techie breakdown.
Okay, so basically inside the phone's history database, there's a table that keeps track of all the web activity. Each entry in the table has a timestamp, the URL that was visited, and really importantly, a unique identifier called a UID.
And UIDs, those are like what, digital fingerprints for each tab?
Exactly. Every time you open a new tab in Safari, it gets its own unique UUID.
Ah, okay.
And this lets forensic analysts see which tabs were open when and what happened in each one.
So it's like a breadcrumb trail if you're browsing.
Precisely. Now, here's where it gets really interesting in this case.
Okay.
The UID for that 2:27 a.m. how long to die in cold search.
Yeah.
It doesn't match the UUID for any of the other web activity McCabe says she was doing around 6 a.m.
So even if we ignore the dash cam footage for a second,
Right.
the data itself is saying those two searches couldn't have happened in the same tab, which is exactly what the prosecution's claiming.
Exactly.
And to make things even weirder, later versions of that Celebrate software actually removed that 2:27 a.m. timestamp from their analysis.
Removed it completely.
It's like the digital evidence itself is playing hide and seek with us.
Sounds like Green might be onto something big here.
It definitely does. And it's not just that search that's raising eyebrows, right? It's like the whole chain of events with this phone data.
Yeah, definitely suspicious.
You know, like how Green had to actually ask for that hash value documentation to make sure the data was legit.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And then the prosecution didn't hand it over straight away.
Oh, that's not standard procedure.
Not at all. That's a major red flag. It makes you wonder if someone's trying to, I don't know, sweep something under the rug with that data.
You can't blame the defense for being a little concerned about that.
I mean, if you're going to use digital evidence to potentially send someone to prison,
Right.
You'd think they'd be super careful about making sure it's authentic.
100%.
So not only do we have those conflicting timestamps and that potentially deleted search, but now we've got this weirdness with the hash value documentation too.
It's like a digital house of cards, one thing pulled out and the whole thing could collapse.
Exactly. And remember, this all ties back to Paul's question about that argument from the prosecution,
Right.
that both the 2.27 a.m. search and that later search happened in the same tab.
Yeah.
But if that's just plain wrong, which is what the digital evidence suggests, then their whole timeline falls apart.
And if their timeline's messed up.
Then their whole case against Karen could be seriously weakened.
Exactly. And that's where the idea of impeachment evidence comes in.
Right.
If they're knowingly using a theory that the data just doesn't support,
Yeah.
that really damages their credibility.
So, Paul, based on everything we've looked at so far,
Mm-hmm.
it seems very possible that those timestamp issues and the way they handled the phone data could actually be used as impeachment evidence.
It's definitely on the table.
And it just goes to show digital forensics are so important in these kinds of trials.
It's not just about recovering deleted files. It's about understanding the data
Right.
and seeing how it fits into the bigger picture.
And in this case, those digital details could really make or break the outcome for Karen Reed.
No doubt about it.
But just to play devil's advocate here for a sec,
Sure.
couldn't some of this be just like a technical glitch or human error?
It's possible, but with this many inconsistencies.
Yeah.
And the way the prosecutions acted, it's hard to believe it's all just a coincidence.
It's a lot of coincidences all happening at once.
Exactly.
The more we dig into this, the more questions pop up.
It's like peeling back the layers of a digital onion.
And as we keep peeling back those layers,
Yeah.
we have to think about the bigger picture here.
This isn't just about one case.
Right.
It's about how much we rely on digital evidence in our justice system.
And that we need transparency and careful examination of that evidence.
We can't risk convicting innocent people based on bad information.
Absolutely. People's lives are at stake here. And that brings us back to your question, Paul. If that prosecution argument about the searches is impossible, it doesn't just throw their timeline into question. It makes you wonder about all the other digital evidence they might be using.
Every piece of it.
And in a case where someone's freedom is on the line,
Right.
those questions can't be ignored.
We have to make sure the truth wins out.
And that means holding all evidence, especially digital evidence, to the highest possible standard.
Couldn't agree more.
All right, so we're back. And Paul, your question about whether this whole thing with the searches could be like grounds for impeachment evidence, that's a really important one.
Yeah, it gets right to the heart of how we handle digital evidence in court, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if the prosecution is building their whole case on data that's been, proven wrong
Really?
or maybe even messed with,
Yeah.
it makes you wonder about everything else they're presenting.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just McCabe's testimony anymore. It's like, can we trust any of the digital evidence they're bringing up?
Right. If one piece of the puzzle is clearly off, it makes you question the whole picture.
Exactly. Like, were there other times they might have manipulated the data?
Yeah.
Are we missing other key pieces of information?
It's a valid concern.
And that brings us back to impeachment evidence, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not a lawyer or anything, but based on everything we've talked about,
Yeah.
those conflicting timestamps, the potentially deleted search, how they handled the phone data,
Right.
it seems like all of that could be used to say, hey, McCabe's not a reliable witness, and maybe even weaken the prosecution's entire case.
It's definitely a possibility.
And it just goes to show digital evidence isn't foolproof.
Oh, not at all.
It can be misinterpreted, it can be tampered with, even totally made up.
And that's why it's so important to have experts like Richard Green involved.
Right. People who can dig into the data, find those inconsistencies, and point them out.
Exactly.
I think this case really shows why we need to be so careful with digital evidence.
We can't just take it at face value.
Nope, we got to understand its limitations and demand transparency from the people presenting it.
Couldn't agree more.
So, Paul, to get back to your question, is that timestamp issue not just a moot point, but actual impeachment evidence? Based on what we've seen, I think there's a strong argument to be made that, yeah, it could be.
Yeah, I'd say so too.
Those inconsistencies and the questions around the phone data, they cast a big shadow of doubt over the prosecution's whole story.
And they could definitely be used to challenge McCabe's credibility.
This has been a wild deep dive, Paul. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, this was a fascinating one.
And to everyone listening, Keep those questions coming.
It's so important to have these conversations.
The more we talk about these issues, the better we'll understand this whole world of digital evidence.
And how to make sure it's used responsibly.
Exactly. So we can get to the truth and protect the innocent.
That's what it's all about.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.